Want to move on to a different topic today. Is it, in fact, time to legalize drugs? Now, a Washington Post op-ed points out that the biggest victims in the war on drugs are often the police officers who lose their lives in the crossfire nearly every day. Quote, drug users generally aren't violent. Most simply want to be left alone to enjoy their high. It's the corner slinger who terrifies neighbors and invites rivals to attack. Public drug dealing creates an environment where disputes about money or respect are settled with guns. Joining me now are the authors of that op-ed piece, Peter Moskos, professor at John Jay College and author of Good Cop in the Hood. Also joined today by Neil Franklin of Law Enforcement Against Prohibition and a retired major with the Maryland State Police. Peter, I want to start with you first. So that's actually a fairly provocative thought that the people who are most impacted are the police officers. But is that, I have to ask you, more of a spin than reality? Is that maybe a more palatable way to sell the idea of decriminalizing drugs to a wary public by saying that police officers are on the line?
I certainly hope it is. That's the intention. It's not just police officers that suffer and put their lives on the line of the day. It's people in neighborhoods that have public drug dealing. That's the key. Is not to legalize drugs is not to make drugs a free-for-all. It's to rein in that free-for-all we have now on the street corner.
Neil, during your time in the Maryland State Police, did you begin during that time as someone who was opposed to legalizing drugs or decriminalizing drugs? And if you did begin that way, what ultimately converted you or persuaded you that that's the wrong way to go?
No, actually, Carlos, I did not begin that way. I actually spent majority of my career in all aspects of drug enforcement, from being a narc on the street all the way up to being a commander of numerous drug task forces. So I was one of those soldiers who was out there fighting the fight, fighting what I thought to be the good fight, as a soldier would do. But what the pivotal point for me was actually a personal one when I lost someone who was very close to me, Edward Totley, who was one of the finest narcotics agents that the state of Maryland had ever seen. And when he was assassinated right here in Washington, D.C. back in October 2000, that was a calling for me to really take a good look at this entire situation. And as Peter said, not just the violence that we as police officers were the recipient of, but the many innocent people in our entrenched neighborhoods where this drug dealing is taking place. They're victimized every day by the violence. So that was a pivotal point for me.
Can I ask you, though, the argument against it, obviously, is that a lot of the lower-level drugs like marijuana, they're a gateway to much heavier drug use, and therefore, in a sense, would explode the problem amongst people at large. How do you deal with that issue?
The countries that have more liberal drug policies, like Portugal and the Netherlands, have lower rates of marijuana usage and lower rates of all drugs. I mean, clearly what we're doing now with this very sort of law enforcement-centered approach to the war on drugs simply doesn't work. So, I mean, at least let's stop and ask directions. We're going the wrong way. At some point, people have to admit that the current policy is a failure. So hopefully we can start talking about reform and start talking about regulating and controlling what are now illegal drugs like we do alcohol and tobacco.
Neil, we only have 30 seconds. Do you want to give me the top 2 or 3 things that you would like to see done if we were to revisit this policy?
Well, the first and most foremost is to end prohibition, because that's where the majority of the violence is. From Mexico into 230-plus cities in our country here, where we have people dying every day as relates to drug violence. And that's attributed directly to prohibition, not drug abuse. We can then focus on the primary issue, which is drug abuse. But right now, we're being diverted. We're being distracted with this war on drugs and prohibition. We need to change that.
Neil Franklin, Peter Moskos, we're going to leave it there. In fact, we're hoping that Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger, who has said that he wants to have this debate out loud, we're hoping that he'll join us in the next couple of weeks. And so maybe we'll ask you back to be part of that conversation as well.
Absolutely. I'll be back. Thank you.
Look forward to it. Do you think that drugs should be legalized? Let your voice be heard. Please log on to our website, twitter.msnbc.com. Follow the link to my Twitter page. You see my face there. Click on it. Or you can go to twitter.com/Carlos Watson. Shoot me a tweet. Let me know what you're thinking.